Crystal Barrois and her family have lived in Serenbe since late 2016, after she and her husband drove down for the day and immediately felt that sense of home, despite the pouring rain during their visit. Since then, she started a family in the community and has watched her kids grow up here, alongside friends and neighbors who all pitch in to co-parent and co-grandparent. It takes a village, they say. At her day job, Crystal manages aircraft transactions at Delta and also serves as a first officer pilot, a profession where women make up only 6% of the workforce. In this interview, Steve and I learn all about Crystal's path to Serenbe, the important work she's doing to make aviation an industry for everyone, and we explore the magic of a Serenbe potluck.
It's such a tight, awesome community of people and support, and I feel like Serenbe has been a big part of our success in raising our kids and commuting and flying and being gone. There have been days when I've said I could not do it if I didn't live here.
Crystal, welcome to the podcast. How are you?
Good. Thank you, Monica. How are you today?
I'm great. Hey, Steve, how are you?
Good morning. I'm good. Looking forward to the conversation.
Good morning, Steve.
Crystal, you are in the office. You work for Delta. You are a pilot. But what I really want to know is, what is your Serenbe story? How did you first find out about Serenbe, and why did you move?
Well, first of all, thank you all for having me on the podcast. I'm very excited to be here. My Serenbe story, actually, Delta brought us to Atlanta. I'm from Atlanta originally, lived away for many years, married a Louisiana boy, and we were actually living in New Orleans when I got hired at Delta as a pilot, like you said. And after a couple of years of commuting, because Delta doesn't have a base in New Orleans, they used to, they don't anymore. After a couple of years of commuting to both New York and Atlanta, I begged him, could we please move back to Atlanta? And he begrudgingly agreed because, you know, Louisiana people love Louisiana, and New Orleans is a really cool town. So in 2015, we moved back to Atlanta. And we were living in the city, and both of us agreed we could not live in the city. I had lived away from Atlanta for many years, but number one, the traffic was awful. And we just didn't really want to start a family in the city. So we started looking around Atlanta, and my parents actually mentioned Serenbe. We kind of were not really loving any of the neighborhoods that we visited around town. And they said, well, why don't you guys check out this place called Serenbe? So we drove down one day. It was raining, pouring down rain, and drove around Serenbe. And both of us agreed that it just felt like home. So this was at the end of around Christmas time of 2016. And we bought a house in Grange a couple months later. So here we are several years later, and we've lived in multiple neighborhoods of Serenbe. Now we live in the Crossroads, and it's our home. We've got 2 kids and love it.
That's the Serenbe way, right? To move around, move neighborhoods.
You have to try them all. They really all have a different personality. So all of them have been fun. We've loved living in all the neighborhoods. Happy in the Crossroads right now.
Yeah, the Crossroads is great. And your husband is also a pilot.
That's right.
Now, is that how you guys met, or did you just meet in New Orleans, just happenstance, or was it through the industry? And if it's a really, really terrible story you don't want to tell.
No, it's actually a great story. We met through the airlines. The reason I became a pilot was because I wanted to travel and see the world. This was back in 2009. I took 6 weeks off work to go backpacking around Southeast Asia. And I was in Thailand, and a girlfriend was meeting me in Thailand to do a couple of weeks of backpacking. And she actually met my husband on the flight on the way over to Bangkok to meet me. And she invited him to hang out with us while we were traveling around over there. And he did. And that's how we met. So we ended up backpacking together for a couple of weeks. And that was it. And he just happened to be a pilot too. So it was meant to be, I guess.
That's a great story.
Yeah, it was fun.
Yeah, definitely. Now, what's interesting is that it's a very small percentage of women make up pilots in the industry, right? I think it's about 6%. Is
That's
that right?
right.
So you wanted to travel the world, you wanted to sort of see everything, but did you ever start out wanting to fly? Was that something at a young age? How do you become a pilot? Like if I wanted to go fly now, is it too late for me?
No, it's not too late. You might not want to start now because it takes a few years to become a professional pilot. But to answer your question, no, I never considered flying. Growing up as a little girl, I didn't realize that women flew because, to your point, there are so few women that actually fly planes. When I was a freshman in college at the University of Georgia, I met a woman that flew. She was an old lady. She'd flown in the WASP, actually, which are the Women Air Force Service pilots. And they trained a lot of the
Wow.
pilots back during World War II. And I met this woman, and she was so cool. She was, this little bitty thing. And she said, honey, you can fly too if you want. And that really just sparked the interest. And so I took a introductory flight. I went to the local airport in McDonough, Georgia, where I'm from, and I took an introductory flight and realized that's what I wanted to do. So I ended up leaving University of Georgia to go to flight school in Florida, and the rest is history. So 20 years later, here I am.
Have you seen a lot of change over the years regarding women in the industry? Is that 6% for commercial pilots? Is that sort of now this is a good number, even though it seems really small? Was it smaller when you started?
Shockingly, no, there hasn't been a lot of change. That needle has not moved in over 50 years, 50 or 60 years. A lot of the work that I've done at Delta has been to figure out what is holding women back to getting into our industry and what is holding women back from coming to Delta. The women that are out there, are women coming to Delta. And so a lot of the work I've done is just to figure out that problem. What is exactly is the root of the problem? And then how do we solve it at Delta? Yes, but also on an industry level, because I'm sure, as you know, there is a workforce shortage throughout the country and the world, really. But in the airlines in particular, we're really starting to see some pressure from talent shortage, just not enough people entering the pipeline. So it's really critical now that we start tapping into the 50% of the population that hasn't traditionally been attracted to our industry. So there is a lot of work around just advertising, marketing materials, and making sure that women are present in marketing materials, because you really do. I always say you have to see it to be it. And if young girls don't see themselves in the role, then they're not going to, just like me, they're not going to consider it as a viable career option for them. So there's a lot of ongoing work to try to attract women, but then also retain them. So taking another look at schedule flexibility and maternity benefits and uniforms, just
Yeah.
sort of rethinking the way we've always done things so that we can start to attract women into the industry.
Tell me a little bit about that. So you've been flying, but at some point, corporate or I guess headquarters tapped you to start working on some of these initiatives. And one of them, I think maybe you even drove, which was maternity. Can you tell us a little bit about that? Because I think that's super important. As a mom, we have two small kids. You personally saw and felt the constraints that were around that. And that started with the uniforms.
Yeah, that's right. So I didn't really understand how the industry was designed differently for women, or really without women in mind, until I had a baby, till I had my first child. And it was a lot of things. It was the uniform. So I didn't have a maternity uniform. I kind of had to cobble something together. And then pregnancy. I remember telling the company that I was pregnant, and I felt like the first pregnant person that ever existed, basically. And this is not just, this is not Delta specific or anything. This is just the way it was in our industry. This was 7 or 8 years ago. there just weren't a lot of resources. There weren't a lot of work rules and policies that really pertain to women. Once I had the baby, we didn't have a real maternity benefit or or time off. All of that was sort of piecemeal and figuring out how am I going to get this time off. It definitely wasn't part of the policies that we were entitled to. We had to navigate all of that. And then breastfeeding and just things that moms have to do,
Oh, yeah.
flexible work schedules, all that stuff. There was no infrastructure in place to perpetuate success of women. And so what we see in the industry is a lot of women exit aviation after they have children. We have the data on that. And a lot of women actually do leave the industry because it's very difficult to navigate. And so the very first thing I did was I was about 4 months postpartum. I went up to New York and I spoke to our union because maybe a lot of people don't know this, but most pilots are unionized. And I presented with a small group of women on, hey, we are not being supported. And our union needs to go to the company and say, please represent on our behalf. We need pregnancy leave. We need maternity leave. We need proper fitting uniforms, all of this. And so that initial presentation is really what launched me into this whole other career path of I was tapped by our senior vice president, Steve Dixon at the time, who later became the FAA administrator. I was tapped by him to sort of figure out, hey, let's figure this out at Delta. Like we want women to be successful. How do we make that happen? How do we start turning that flywheel, if you will? And so I spent a couple of years developing leadership programs for pilots so that step one is you need women in leadership. And we weren't really seeing a lot of that in the operational roles, not just at Delta, but across the industry. So how do we get women into leadership roles so that they're at the table helping make the decisions, about policies and things? So we worked on leadership development. And then I ran some of our pilot pipeline programs. We have a great program called the Delta Propel program. And so I worked on that team to help figure out how do we attract young people not only into aviation, but into aviation careers at Delta. And so it's really it's a holistic approach to changing the cultural shift so that women want to be a part of the industry, and so I've had the opportunity to do a lot of that at Delta. And it all started just with having a baby and speaking up, raising my hand and saying, we could do this better. We could do this in a better way so that we do attract women. And then once we do, because it costs a lot to train a pilot, right? And we want to keep them once we have them. So how do we do that? A lot of the work that I've done has been to help not only at Delta, but in the industry.
Are you finding that women are coming in from any particular place? Like, are there any that, I'm a big believer, like college is great, but I think trade schools are really probably a huge way that we should be bringing people into the workplace. Like they don't need to go into 4 years of debt for a liberal college education if they are not really into school and they actually know what they want to do. And, we've had a huge debate with our son who's going to college, but like he wants to go into game design. Could he just go straight in? So I think that that's a really interesting track for people. Are there some schools like that or high schools that kind of can set you on that path, and any locally?
Sure. So I agree with you. And actually, the industry is agreeing with you. When we had a large pilot surplus a decade ago, and there were just thousands and thousands of pilots and not as many jobs, the college degree was one of those things to sort of weed out people, if you will. Now, though, what we've realized is that, and what the airlines have done is shift away from needing a college degree. It's still something that's nice to have, and I don't ever want to deter anyone from getting a college degree if that's what they want to do. But to be a pilot, most of the airlines do not require a college degree anymore to work there. And so actually Delta just announced last week, we have the Delta Propel Flight Academy. And I don't know all the details of the Flight Academy yet. It's very new, just launched. And the United Aviate Academy is another one where they don't require a college degree. And you go, actually, the airline is overseeing a lot of the training, and you're getting your pilot's licenses, and then you're getting on a career path to the major carriers. So that actually exists for most of
Amazing.
the major airlines today, where you can plug in before college or after. What we've seen with a lot of these are people that are changing careers, and later into their 30s or 40s, they're saying, I want to go be a pilot now. And these flight academies are making it possible for them to do that without a college degree. So
Yeah.
it's just one pipeline. We have university partners through Propel as well. So Auburn University has a really great aviation school. Embry-Riddle, which is my alma mater, great aviation school. But you are paying for a 4-year college degree plus your flight training. So you're really starting out with a lot of debt or paying a lot of money to earn your flight ratings. And now today, it's not necessarily necessary that you do that.
And do you see have the benefits? Because I had never thought about that. You know, you're a pilot, you've had a baby, or you're pregnant, and you're one, maybe you need, different uniforms. So it's like, hey, I'm expanding. I don't fit into these pants. I don't fit into this shirt anymore. Give me something that's like, I can feel comfortable in. But then once that baby's born, I mean, breastfeeding, like it was a second job, and then pumping. And so what if you're on a transcontinental flight? How do you do that? Or where are the, not regulations, but rules and guidelines around it, right? Because it's instead of like, oh, you'll find a minute and just pop into the bathroom and pump while your co-pilot flies, but like actually having the policies around it. I had never thought, like, what do you do? Or if you're a flight attendant, same thing, right?
Yeah, so I would say historically, the FAA, the Federal Aviation Administration, they are the government regulatory agency, that umbrella that all of the air carriers fall under. And the FAA has been very hesitant to weigh in on these things. So companies have been left, and unions have been left to deal with these types of things on a case by case basis. And because the amount of women, the percentage of women so small, you might only see a couple of these cases every year. I represented Delta on the FAA Women in Aviation Advisory Board. So actually had a dedicated board. The DOT appointed us to start giving recommendations on how we can solve this problem. And one of the things that we said was, well, if you continue to treat women like a small percentage, i.e., don't weigh in on things like breast pumping and all this stuff, and while you're flying, then you're just perpetuating the small percentages of women pilots. So we have to start designing a system with women in mind. So, hey, we're going to give carriers guidelines on this. We are going to do a study or designate a work group or something to put together recommendations on how do women fly and nurse their, feed their babies too. So there are no guidelines right now. So it really is up to the carrier and we're still kind of doing these things on a case by case basis. And I know a lot of women have chosen to take unpaid leave if it's available while they're breastfeeding their babies, because it's just a lot easier, So there's a lot of ongoing work right now, but one of our recommendations was, hey, put together a work group to figure this out. We have to figure it out. If we're going to attract women into aviation, women are biologically the gender that has the babies. We have to start talking about this.
Mm-hmm. No, I love it. Well, and I love that you're leading the charge there. That's so important, Crystal.
Well,
it's a lot of work.
It's a lot of work. It really is. And there have been moments where, and I thank you for, that's a compliment to say I'm leading the charge. I'm working with a lot of women across the industry who we're all very passionate about making this an equitable industry. It is such a fascinating, fun, challenging, rewarding industry. And we're very passionate about making sure that women know that if they want to be successful in aviation, there are opportunities for them. And so I will take that as leading the charge because it really is a group effort. We all have to be responsible for making the change. So I will own that. And it's a big, complex problem, system of barriers, all of that. But, we just start chipping away at it. That's what we're doing right now. We're just chipping away one thing at a time.
Well, and one thing that you did, which I loved, and I think this was maybe a year or two ago, it wasn't TikTok. Was it an Instagram video?
It was
Your
TikTok.
dance?
It was TikTok. Yes.
Was it? Okay. Early days TikTok. You were an early influencer. So whose idea was this? So Delta put together, it was like a group of professionals. It wasn't just pilots, right? It was women though, all women in the industry at Delta, right? And you guys did a TikTok dance. Tell us about this. Steve, have you seen this?
Steve, have you seen the TikTok video? I'll send it. We'll have to share it with you if you haven't.
I have not. That's news. I had not seen that.
We'll put it in the show notes. Yeah, Steve gets to learn stuff on Serenbe Stories too. Tell us about this. It was so fun. All of us, like the mom, all of us in our friend group, it was so fun to see you showcased. How did this come together?
So we have a very young, bright marketing team at Delta. And I did not even have a TikTok account. And I said, when they asked me to come out and do this TikTok video, I was like, I think you should find someone else younger, at least. Are you sure you have the right person? But we went out and we had a flight attendant and a ramp personnel woman. And they made us learn this Beyonce Lady Gaga song. And we went out and filmed this TikTok video, and it's probably, I don't want to claim this, but it's definitely one of the most watched TikTok videos that Delta has ever put out. And, I think
of course.
And I'm so embarrassed. I'm so self-conscious about being on it, but it really was a great showcase of women for young people, because that's a platform that a lot of young people tune into. And so it really was an opportunity. Anytime I can be in my uniform in front of young people, I do that because it's important for them, again, to see that they can be successful in the role. So hopefully maybe one little girl was inspired by that. It was fun. It was fun for me to do it. And I was very honored that Delta asked.
Well, Monica, you'll have to put a link on the podcast.
We will. We'll find the link and put it into the podcast show notes because it's a lot of fun. And I do think thinking about how do you reach those younger women, or just really anybody to start educating that women are pilots and that it's an option and a path that's viable. And I think it was a really fun way to do it. And I always think, Delta's like our hometown airline, obviously. And Steve and I are about to get on a Delta flight this afternoon for New York. But I just think that Delta has this really warm, wonderful, inviting brand. And I think that worked so nicely in it. So I don't know, it sort of just continued my positive brand perception of it. So I thought that was fun. And yeah, I do hope that it does change people's minds.
Me too. I hope so too.
I mentioned that your husband is a pilot as well, and you have two young kids are they both under 7 now or 6?
5 and 7. Yes.
5 and 7. So how has that been? And, you're both flying. Have you been flying a little bit less? Like, I know with a lot of the work you're doing at corporate, but like, how is that? Because I don't think he was headquartered out of Atlanta. Was he still headquartered out of another hub?
Yes. So he's the United pilot. And so we juggle that. United does not have a base in Atlanta. So that's something that we have always juggled. And I was thinking about this last night, thinking about this interview. And this actually goes back to Serenbe, how we've been able to make it work. When our kids were little, I've always had nannies throughout the time they've been alive. And when our kids are little, we had a nanny who, she was a local gal, wonderful, wonderful gal. And our kids hung out with other kids who also had nannies and all over Serenbe every day. We have so many pictures of them. I think they had the most magical childhood of any children ever. They played in the waterfall and went on the trails and went over to the bus that's in the wildflower meadow and went to the pool in the summertime. I mean, they just had the most magical childhood with the nannies growing up. And then as they've kind of gotten older, I've had to actually, my old nanny from when they were little, she's now a pilot. She became a pilot too.
Amazing.
I know. I was like, wait, you work for two pilots and you're inspired to be a pilot?
Aww.
So she actually just got hired at her first airline. So super proud of her. But my girlfriends and I had similar age kids. We used to text each other and say, our kids live the most magical life ever when they were, little bitty babies. And now one of the reasons that we moved to the Crossroads was we have a carriage house, and one of my neighborhood girlfriends, her mother actually lives in our carriage house and is our nanny. And it's just like her grandson and daughter live in the neighborhood. And again, it's such a tight, awesome community of people and support. And I feel like Serenbe has been a big part of our success in raising our kids and commuting and flying and being gone. There have been days when I've said I could not do it if I didn't live here. And so it's such a wonderful network of support if you have little kids. And really, our kids live really good lives. They really do. It's so magical for them.
Yeah. We always say, like, what are they all going to do when they grow up? Like, I have some on the older cohort, but there really is this insane gaggle of kids, if that's a word, like in that sort of 5 to, I don't know, even 12-year-old age right now. And so if you are that age and a kid, like, it is so cool to live here because you just run around. You run around and the whole place is your playground.
Free range kids.
And your kids are safe. That's right. Free range kids. Your kids are safe. If your kid goes running off, which has happened, my kids have gone running off. Somebody is going to know your kid. There's a few Bobby stories, right? Since he was a little baby going and running off, but somebody is going to knows your kid, and like, they're not lost. They're just free range. So it really has been a wonderful, life-saving place to have children. It really has.
Well, and that is pretty cool that you were, I don't want to say you stumbled upon sort of a grandmother nanny, but here somebody's mom moves and, she's not working, and what a wonderful match that kind of came together. And how do we find that organically in this world today? We're pretty lucky. Steve, as the quintessential grandfather now, I was with Kara, obviously we all know Kara, the middle daughter, and she was just saying how magical it is. Steve takes all the grandchildren, maybe not Ella Rose yet, but right, all 5 of the boys every Saturday night through Sunday morning. I mean, God, I wish I had that. And the kids look forward to it.
And that's the nice thing about Serenbe. If their grandparents don't live here, there are plenty of substitute grandparents all over the community. So
that's true. Yeah, definitely.
Parents and grandparents, substitute family all over the place.
Oh, yeah. That we all sort of parent each other's kids. They come together and it's cool. It's nice to know those younger kids. It's not just your kids' age group. You have this relationship with everybody who lives here. So as we wrap up, we're sort of walking into the question that we ask everybody. If somebody was coming to Serenbe for the first time, what is one thing that you want to tell them that they can't miss, or it's your favorite, or a secret something?
Yeah. So my favorite thing, there's a lot of things that I love about Serenbe. I love Sunset Park and Sunday, or having a burger at the Daisy on the weekend, or the veggie burger. But really, I put a lot of thought into what is the thing that like really makes Serenbe. And to me, it's a potluck. So if you have the opportunity to go to a Serenbe potluck, it ain't your grandma's potluck, It is the most, first of all, gorgeous thing you've ever seen. Because And this is something that I think I do take for granted sometimes, is we put the effort to have the experience. Like we set the table, we pull out the linens, we make the food beautiful, not just, and it's healthy and it tastes good, yes, but it's also beautiful and it's fresh and it's from the garden or whatever, a lot of times. And it's just such a community. It's something that we all look for. I mean, Monica, you and we just went to one last weekend,
I know.
So that to me is the thing that I love about Serenbe, is that that's the representation of what I love. It's the potluck, the food, the beauty of it all, the taking a minute to appreciate each other and the moment. Just, it doesn't have to be for any reason, just a Sunday. But really, like, if you're going to come for the first time, you should try to get yourself invited to one of those, because it's pretty magical.
Well, and it happens. You could be walking down the street, you could be buying a bottle of wine at the general store, and you strike up a conversation with a resident and they'll invite you over. It sounds strange, but they will.
Yes, they will.
If you see one carrying a dish down the street, stop and ask what they're up to.
Follow them. Follow them to their house. But that's a great example. Like that last Sunday, it's like everybody just sort of came together and it showcased their creativity or their talent. They made whatever it is that they wanted to make. And you're right. It's interesting. I tend to call it competitive potluck, but it's not competitive in the way that we think, one-upping each other. But you take in that you have access to all this great, incredible fresh food, that people really are interested in new recipes and new flavors. And so you start to cook that way and you start to cultivate that interest, I think, by being here. If you may have had already interested in culinary and cooking, but it's sort of a different way to express yourself. And then, or you're challenging yourself. Like I always joke, like eggplant season, and you're like, oh my God, I got eggplant again in the share. I don't know what to do with it. But, maybe you figure out 4 ways to do some type of baba ganoush. But I like that. That's a great answer. I don't know if we've had that answer yet. The potluck answer.
It's the most special thing that I've experienced at Serenbe, and we continue to experience it week and month after month. It just doesn't ever get old. Like, it's fun to be on the group chat and figure out what everybody's going to bring, and then just see this magical, beautiful spread come together.
Right. Come together. Exactly.
It really is. It's pretty unique.
And you do wonder, Steve, like, is that somehow, obviously we have the farm here, so that sets the table, if you will, but your background in culinary and hospitality, that must seep through, right? Beyond the restaurants.
It's part of the culture that started when we had 6 houses and 8 houses. It was, what's everybody doing tonight for dinner? Oh, well, why don't we bring it all out into the street to a table? And so I think that culture has continued, just as waving at your neighbor has continued. And so it's part of ingrained in what Serenbe's about. And it does have a hospitality foundation.
All right. So when you come here next, look for somebody carrying a dish. Well, Crystal, is there anything else you want to share with us? I mean, this has been such a great conversation, and I always learn something fun about you every time we talk.
No, I really appreciate you guys having me and letting me talk about the things I'm passionate about. Serenbe being one, and the other, seeing more women in aviation. So, no, I'm just really grateful that you guys invited me on the pod.
Very interesting to hear all about it. That's great.
Mm-hmm. Maybe one more woman will become a pilot having listened to this.
Maybe so. Hopefully so.
Yeah. So thanks, Crystal.
Bye, guys. Have a good day.
Bye all.